Traders are people who are taking positions, so you are dealing with risk. If you are a merchant, you are buying and selling at the same time, probably back to back. The four big names, they're called ABCD, so ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus. In my opinion, you need to add today COFCO. We in our garden, we make a distinction. Grains and oilseeds, where you trade wheat, maize, soybeans, meals, oils. That's one group, that's the biggest group. And another group called soft, where you trade coffee, cocoa, cotton, sugar, orange juice.
Welcome everyone, welcome back to a new podcast episode. Today we are joined by Ivo. Ivo, it's a pleasure to having you today. You are like agricultural commodities professor, VC in the agricultural business, venture capital industry. And as well, you worked as a trader for more than almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So can you maybe introduce yourself more?
Okay, I'm from Argentina, specifically from a city called Rosario, which is now very famous because Messi came from Rosario. And so I started, I'm an accountant, then I did a master in economics, and I started working for the local grain exchange. So Rosario is a very big center for agriculture trade in Argentina. Mostly 80% of all the exports, they come from that region. So there is a big cash market in Rosario, and I worked for the grain exchange for 2 years making market analysis. After that, I joined Cargill in 1989, and I worked in Cargill almost for 30 years. I started in Rosario, then I moved to Buenos Aires, where I did the FOB markets. Then I moved here in 1993. So I was made the joke that they sent me here for a training period, that they forgot me here, so I'm still around. And so here I work in the wheat department, after I work in the soybean department, and at the end of my career I got transferred to sugar, and I did sugar as well. And then I retired at the end of 2017, and now I'm non-executive member of different boards. I teach in the university, and like you said, I also make some investments in AgTech, in VC.
Okay, quite interesting. Okay, so let's focus a little bit on about the commodities trading world, and let's talk about what is your role as a commodity trader, and then you can switch to soybean.
Well, it depends very much on where are you sitting. So basically in the value chain, you have like three positions. Either you're a domestic merchant or trader, that you are buying grains from farmers and then selling that to industry or to exporters. Then you can be at the FOB level, where you're basically originating and exporting, or you can be at the C&L level, where you are mostly in the hub of the company. Geneva is a big hub, so most of the big grain companies, they are located here. ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus, COFCO. And here you are doing the CNF markets, and also, depending on the trader, you can do also a bit of prop trading. Okay, so depending on where you are, you can play different roles.
Okay, Tansi, can you maybe, you have the experience to explain a little bit the agricultural market, I mean, in terms of commodities, what kind of different types?
There is a big division. Usually people call, so if you think about the world of commodities, roughly 60% of the world of commodities is energy. So crude oil is the king, roughly 40% of the total, 45%. Then you have metals, 20%, and agris around 20%. Some people, when they make reference to agris, they speak about softs. However, we in our garden, we make a distinction. We speak about two different groups. Grains and oilseeds, where you trade wheat, maize, soybeans, meals, oils. That's one group, that's the biggest group. And another group called soft, where you trade coffee, cocoa, cotton, sugar, orange juice. That's a smaller group. Different characteristics, probably more volatility. The supply response is a bit slower because the crops takes longer to develop. But there is a pretty clear division among the two different groups.
And in terms of volume, in terms of agricultural commodities, what is the biggest one in the world in terms of trading?
Well, maize is probably the biggest with 1.2 billion metric tons. Wheat is 800 billion. Soybeans are around 400 million. Sugar is about 200 million. And then, for example, coffee is 10 million metric tons. Cocoa is 5-6 million metric tons. So there is a big difference. Overall, you grow around 9 billion metric tons of crops per year, including fruits, vegetables, and all that. So that's the size of the flow.
Okay. So during your career, you started with soybean?
No, I started with grapes.
Oh,
In Argentina, I traded wheat, maize, sorghum, barley. Then I did soybeans here, which is most of my career. And at the end of my trading career, I did sugar.
okay. Okay, let's start. Okay, it's quite wide. So let's start maybe with the grains. What can you say the biggest exporter of grains? What people should know about these markets?
Well, the two biggest flows are maize and wheat. In the case of maize, the exporters are quite concentrated. You have the US, you have Brazil, you have Argentina, you have Ukraine, but the buyers are pretty atomized. Okay. In the case of wheat, you have a pretty atomized supply side, where Russia is the biggest exporter with roughly 20%, but you also have the European Union, the US, Canada, Australia, Argentina, and buyers are pretty atomized as well. And while, for example, in the case of soybeans, you have a very concentrated supply side, Brazil, the US, Argentina, but also a very concentrated demand side, where you have China and the European Union covering most of the demand. So yeah, different markets, they have different characteristics and different dynamics.
Okay. And what are the factors who can make this volatility in this market, I mean, in terms of price?
Well, volatility, okay, you have always volatility on the supply side because of weather. So weather brings a lot of uncertainty, and now lately we are going through pretty drastic weather episodes, so defining the supply side is becoming more difficult. Then you have geopolitics, where, okay, if you have problems with exporters, prices are moving up. If you have problems with importers, prices are moving down. Then you have Trump's, basically, decisions, which bring a lot of turbulences to the market, which are very difficult to predict. So you are creating a lot of volatility, which I call bad volatility, because it's difficult to trade. On the demand side, it's probably slower. You have population changes, you have GDP per capita changes, but also you have suddenly regulations which create new demand. So, for example, now biofuels are a big factor in our market. So biofuels are connecting the agri world with the energy world, but in most of the cases, biofuels are not economic, so you need to create mandates or subsidies to make them work. But that's expanding a lot. Today, in some markets, for example, if you take cane in Brazil, 50% goes to ethanol, 50% to sugar. If you take soybean oil in the US, probably more than 50% of the soybean oil is going now to biodiesel. If you take rapeseed oil in Europe, also 60% is going to biodiesel. So that's a big swing factor as well. But today it's very difficult to project prices in agris because the demand side is very arbitrary because of biofuels, and the supply side is suffering, let's say, the consequences of climate change. So regardless, I don't think climate change is necessarily shrinking crops, because in some places you are expanding crops, but it brings volatility.
Okay. It's quite interesting on the fact that you are from Argentina. Do you think it's a big advantage to start in this grain market because you have a lot of exporters in South America?
Yeah, when I came, Argentina was a big player in most of the markets. Then Argentina in the last 30 years, due to poor macroeconomic policies, slowed down versus Brazil. So Brazil became now the king of agriculture markets. But when I was, let's say, growing, when I was starting my career, Argentina was a big swing factor. This is why companies were bringing quite a lot of Argentine professionals here. Today, Argentina is a big player in soybean meal, in soybean oil, in maize. But today, Brazil is taking, let's say, probably the position that Argentina had at even more 30 years ago. Brazil is a fantastic case of agricultural success, really.
My God, it's still the case.
Oh, yeah, they will keep growing. Brazil has the potential to keep expanding without problems. If the price incentives are there, Brazil will continue expanding, really.
And do you see any potential candidate to be a bigger player in the grain market in the future, maybe? For example, if crude oil, we have Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. I mean, new players?
New players, yes.
You have new players, but I don't think they will have the size of Brazil or the US. But, okay, you are expanding places like Paraguay, like Uruguay, like some countries in the Black Sea region. Yeah, there are countries which are basically growing, but not to the same extent.
Okay, so it's very interesting. Let's switch to soybean now. Okay. Can you explain us a little bit the landscape of this commodity? In terms of exporter, importer, the same question is up.
Okay, first, soybeans is an oilseed. So when you crush soybeans, you get around 20% oil and 80% meal. Okay, the oil goes in two main directions. It goes to food, when you use oil to make a salad, or it goes to biofuels. Okay, the meal is used mostly to feed animals, pigs, poultry, dairy cattle. Okay, and a bit is human as well, but it's a minority in the total share. So it originated in China, then it expanded all around the world. The main producer today is Brazil. Brazil produces about 170 million metric tons. Then the US, which 120 million metric tons. So the US was the biggest producer until 10 years ago, when actually Brazil took the lead position. Argentina is around 50 million metric tons, but it has been pretty stagnant in the last years, again, because of macroeconomic uncertainty. And then you have others, like China is producing 20 million metric tons, India is producing also, Canada, Ukraine, Russia, Paraguay, Uruguay, Bolivia. But it's very concentrated. So if you take the biggest players, most of the share is among them. And on the demand side, it's also very concentrated. China is the biggest. So today the world flow, by flow I mean the portion which is exported, imported, is around 170 million metric tons, and China is 100, 110. And then you have Europe with 15. So yeah, they are very dominant. And then you have a lot of other countries, but these two countries are really dominant.
Okay, quite interesting. In terms of same factors are the same for the price volatility. It's the same as the grain science, geopolitics, weather, of course.
Yeah, it's quite okay. Yeah, and again, biofuels are very important there because a lot of oil is going to biodiesel and renewable diesel today. So any change there today, for example, all the world is waiting to see what the Trump administration is going to do with biofuels in the US, and that could lead to significant price changes for the beans, for the meal, for the oil, for the relative value. So yeah, today markets are really focused in a lot of decisions which are not purely free market oriented, but they are policy driven.
Okay, interesting. And now, like a switch to sugar. What can you say about this commodity? Same landscape?
Well, sugar is also very interesting. It's smaller than beans. So the total production is about 200 million metric tons. You trade either raw sugar or refined sugar. The main producer is also Brazil. So Brazil has a big role in those flows, followed by India. Then you have Thailand, and then you have others. But Brazil is very dominant. And on the demand side, it's a bit more atomized. So you have China, Indonesia, and a lot of others. But the main difference between the two markets is the delivery mechanism in the futures. So in the case of soybean meal, and soybean oil, people use Chicago, and the delivery mechanism is in the US. While in sugar, you can deliver at option price wherever you want around the world. Not wherever you want, where you have delivery points, but there's plenty of different delivery points. So that creates a complete different dynamic into the two markets. So, for example, in the case of soybeans, premiums are more volatile because all the relative values around the world against the US are changing all the time. While in the case of sugar, premiums are more stable, but you have more volatility between the first and second position, so the time spread is more volatile. So yeah, when you are moving from one product to the other, it requires a bit of a change in your mindset, because even if you have let's say the trader's glasses, that you can see the world with the right glasses, you need to adapt to understand how price evolve, because it's not the same. So you have much more deliveries in relative terms in the sugar market than in the soybean market, and that creates a different game, the game around the delivery point, where in soybeans almost you don't deliver.
Okay. Very interesting. Let's talk about trading of all these commodities. So where we trade them, first of all, in the world, so geographics?
There is a big division between what is purely prop, so whatever you do in Chicago or in any other relevant, let's say, reference market. But in ours, in beans, Chicago is the most dominant. Then you have Dalian in China as well, okay, which is also very big, but more focused in China, while Chicago is more worldwide. So you can trade futures, you can trade options around that. And otherwise, you can trade cash or physical. Okay, you can trade FOB markets in Santos, Paranaguá, Upriver, Argentina. You can trade the US Gulf. You can trade CNF China. So that's the biggest probably division. Physical, which are OTC markets. So they have some liquidity. They are not as liquid as Chicago, but you can trade in and out. And of course, as they are OTCs, you don't pay margin calls. So that's another big difference. So you have credit risk because you are trading with counterparties. You are not trading with the market in play when you trade futures. But I would say that's probably the biggest division. So you can trade either futures or options through a big market like Chicago, which is CME today, or you can trade physical in big concentration markets.
Okay. During your career, you trade more or less physical?
Both. Yeah, you do both, especially when you come here to Geneva. So, for example, Cargill is organized in a way where you have in Geneva most of the decision making about prop. We call here the hub. Then you have different geographies like North America, South America, Europe, Asia, where you trade mostly the physical, and you make the hedges there as well. But when you come to Geneva, you combine both physical and futures.
Interesting. Now, to ask you quite a long question, I would say. Okay, every time people ask me, it's quite hard to understand the fuel process on the supply chain from the sourcing until the end user. I'm going to explain. So we all know that we have the supplier, the ones, the field, when we take the grains, for example. Then you have the traders, the physical traders. Then you have the freight traders, the chartering team, because you need to send these commodities from point A to point B. Of course, you have the ship brokers to take care of all the maritime aspect of it. And at the end, you have the user who get the commodity. So can you make it quite easy to understand?
Yes, I would try. Okay, you start with the farmer. So the farmers are independent. Usually commodity traders, they don't farm, so they don't own the production. There are some exceptions in sugar and in palm, but when we trade soybeans, we don't own the soybeans, so we have to buy it from farmers. So the farmers, they harvest and then they deliver either to private dealers that they are going to receive, clean, store, and then they will move it to the ports or to the local consumption, or you may have big cooperatives as well doing the same, okay? And then those guys, they use a local broker to sell to either exporters or to the local industry. Okay? Assuming it goes to exports, okay, then you trade through the FOB market to a FOB buyer. The FOB buyer could be your own company, let's say Geneva buying from Brazil or from the US, or it could be an independent FOB buyer which is going to put their own freight. Okay. Then once the stem is at the FOB level, you need to freight a boat to move it to the destination. Like explained, you have different roles there. And then once the commodity arrives CNF, it's sold to an end consumer. Let's assume the end consumer is a crusher. The crusher will receive the soybeans in China, and he will crush it, and he will split it in oil and meal, and then he will sell it locally to the demand base that they have at the country. In the case of beans, it's important to know if you have demand both for meal and for oil, or if you have eventually more demand for one or the other and you have to re-export. That creates different economics. Also, crushers may have tax advantages. For example, they can tax soybeans less than the products, so that creates incentives from a fiscal perspective to crush in destinations versus crushing in the origins. So that creates a lot of, let's say, different flows that without governance, they would look very different.
Okay. Quite clear. Thank you for this nice, picture of it. Now I'm about to ask you more about, let's take a zoom on the trader's role. So you are, as a commodity trader, what is your role in this fuel process?
Well, basically, as a commodity trader, you arbitrage opportunities in 3 dimensions: place, time, and form. Place, okay, you are moving things from places where it is too much to places where there is not enough. So Brazil to China. Okay, in time, you have a time curve, so you need to see if the curve is in contango or carry, or if it's in backwardation or inverted. So you play the curve, so you are moving things in time. And in form, you are transforming. So you are transforming soybeans into meal and oil, you are transforming wheat into flour meal, you are transforming, I don't know, different raw materials into feed. Okay, so that's a role. You need to find opportunities there. Now, if you're a prop trader, on top of that, you are taking positions. Okay, you take position when you are not trading back to back. So the essence of trading is there is asynchronicity between demand and supply. Demand and supply, very rarely they come together. So you have either one moving ahead of the other, so you need to take a position. So if the buyer is moving first, you are short. If the seller is moving first, you are long. And once you have that position, you need to decide what do you want to do. So do you want to transfer the risk, so you hedge, or do you want to take the risk? Then you start trading. And if you're trading, you are dealing with uncertainty. So you need to decide basically what's the limit for that position, what are you going to do in the future, what is going to be your game plan. So you start analyzing what may happen in the future. And according to what you believe will happen in the future, you take different decisions. So today we have a lot of information about what's going on, but commodity trading companies are interpretation machines. So what you have is a group of people with certain, let's say, equipments and with a routine. That's the culture of the company. So depending on how you combine people, capital goods, and culture, you develop an interpretation framework. And different companies, they differ in how they interpret the same information. So we all have access to a lot of information, but we all read different things from that information. And this is why we have markets. We read the same, and you like to sell, and I want to buy, so we trade.
Okay, what are your relationships with farmers?
Well, if you are, there are different kind of commodity companies. Some companies are more focused in prop, and they don't have a physical presence. And other companies, they are very asset heavy, and they have a physical presence. When you have a physical presence in what we call origins, so in places where there is production, you are dealing with farmers because you are buying from them. So you can either buy and then load the boat, or you can buy and offer them services. You can sell them inputs, you can sell them seeds, agrochemicals, fertilizer, diesel, so they can be more efficient, and you can lend them money eventually.
Okay, and do you own the fields sometimes, for example?
No, it's very rare. Most of the companies, they are not dealing with agriculture production per se. Okay, there are exceptions, like in the case of sugar, in the case of palm, the companies are more involved in production. But if you're discussing wheat, maize, soybeans, sunflower seeds, rape, you buy from farmers, you don't own. Most of these companies, they are traders, they are not producers.
Okay, it's quite interesting because if you take it in comparison crude oil, most of the big trading houses, they own their refinery. So that's quite a specificity of your market. It's very interesting.
Actually, whenever the commodity trades, they get involved in production, in general, they fail. They are not good farmers. Okay, they are good traders, but it doesn't mean that you're a good farmer because of that.
Yes,
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Okay. And for sometimes as a trading house, are you like trading, for example, the soybean to another trading house?
Yeah, very often. Especially the physical in the big, let's say, OTC markets. Like if you are buying and selling soybeans in Paranaguá, in Santos, in the U.S. Gulf, in Argentina River, you are trading with, you can trade with end consumers, or you can trade among the different trading houses.
What kind of end consumer is it?
Why? Chinese crusher, instead of buying CNF, can buy FOB, and so you sell them FOB directly in the origin.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about now the transportation, the freight aspect of it. Most of them is maritime, it's sea transportation.
Yeah. Well, depending on what level of the value chain are. If you are at the domestic level, you can be truck, rail, barges. But if you're speaking from FOB to ship, it's mostly by boat.
I mean, 80% of the distance is by...
Yeah, by boats, different sizes, depending on the origin and the destinations.
Okay. Well, I'm more the shipping guy, that's maybe, you know, quite well about what kind of ships, because we have the dry bulk commodities, so the grains, for example, and the oil.
While we are speaking in beans, there are basically, you have dries for the beans and the meal, and you have liquids for the oil. Okay, now, among the dries, you have different sizes, so depending on the area you are shipping. But in most of the cases, because China is the biggest buyer, you are shipping big boats that they can load 60 to 80,000 tons.
Okay. So now you're talking about, so of course, in terms of size, maybe you know about Panamax. So what kind of ships, most of them are, for example, inside the soybean market?
In the soybean markets, you load in general big boats, right? Bigger than 60,000 tons, 60 to 80,000. And for some destinations where you are that restricted, like in North Africa, you may need smaller boats. But it's mostly, again, Europe and China are the biggest receivers, and they have did their efforts.
Okay. And in the Humbale was taking care of this escalator.
But different companies are organized different, but in general, they have a freight department. So the freight department can play two roles. It could be just a charterer, where actually you ask them to find a boat of this characteristic from A to Z, and they go to the market and they charter for you, or they can be chartering and taking positions as well. So when they take positions, they have their own fleet, which they don't necessarily own. They can develop a fleet and then charter, and then they either sell to third parties and to also their own company.
Okay. And talking about other commodities still in dry bulk, for example, cacao, we have orange juice.
Yeah, the cacao, coffee, it goes mostly in containers. Okay, it's not dry bulk. And orange juice, it goes in specific boats.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you, because of course you have so many commodities in the dry bulk industry. So for you, you deal only with quite good with soybean, sugar, and
Yes. Raw sugar goes in dry bulk, and refined sugar goes in containers.
Okay. This thing.
Now let's talk about negotiation.
Okay.
So as a trader, you always need to negotiate. If it's not funny, if not.
Well, it depends on how the company is organized, because sometimes you are more focused only in the price direction, and other people that we call merchants are in charge of the negotiations. So sometimes you have the people doing the interface with farmers. This is a group of people. Other people doing the sales. Okay, and then you have the trading entity a bit separated from those two groups, and they are not dealing with the end consumers or with the farmers face to face. Okay, so it depends on how. I would say the smaller houses, you do a bit of everything. You have to buy, sell, trade. For the bigger houses, maybe the traders are just trading, and you have other professionals doing what we call origination and end destination sites. It requires, in my opinion, there are two different jobs. I think they require different abilities. So it's not the same to be in front of a screen taking decisions about prices moving up or down than having the ability to negotiate properly a deal.
Okay. Just to come back about these job questions, what kind of stakeholders do we have? For, of course, we have the farmers, we have the commodity trader, the freight trader, the chartering tip. Did I forget some of them?
You have governments, because governments are involved as well. You have NGOs putting pressure because of sustainability issues. So then you have sometimes like industry associations. Okay, well, you need to deal with that as well. I think that covers most of them.
Okay, it's great. It's really quite interesting. So we talk Rudy about the geopolitical events. Since you started as a trader, did you see big events which impacts a lot your
big changes? Yeah, especially when I started very early, most of the trade was in hands of governments. So there were government-to-government deals. Then in the 90s, we went through a big privatization wave where things went back to the private sector. And then in 2000, China showed up, and China was, again, a big government. So yeah, it changed a lot. Now, in terms of big things, okay, you are always experiencing new things, but now, for example, any decision that Trump may take about tariffs, that can change drastically all the flows. So if eventually Trump decides to put a big tariff against China, China will retaliate, so China will buy less soybeans and maize from the US, they will buy from other origins, so the US will have to sell what they don't sell to China to other places. So that requires a big reshuffling of all the flows. What not different than what happened with the war in Russia, where actually Russia needs to sell some of their products to other destinations because Europe is not buying. So you have, let's say, events hitting markets all the time, and so you have to adapt.
trade patterns.
Yeah, you have to adapt. Yeah, now with problems in the Red Sea as well, so you need to move your routes. Last year, the Panama Canal was somehow dry. You need to move things around.
So geopolitics, of course, is quite big in this issue. Now I want to ask you to come back to this. You explained a little bit about the future, so you can trade the future. What is it exactly or how it works?
Okay, so let's assume you don't have a position. You come to the office in the morning and you are not long, you are not short. So you start reading information, you start speaking with your colleagues, and you develop a view. Okay, so you can develop three different kind of view. You either neutral, so you don't take a position. You believe things are going to move up, so you want to buy, or you believe things are going to move down, so you want to sell. Okay. Once you identify where is the market going to go, you decide what kind of tools you are going to use to position the market accordingly. So you need markets that they have liquidity, that they are big enough, hopefully they have a time curve. So let's say that I made an analysis and I concluded that the crops in South America are going to shrink because it's too hot and China is going to buy a lot. Okay, so therefore I conclude that soybean prices are going to move up. So I have two alternatives. I can buy futures or I can buy options. That's around the futures or derivatives. Or I can buy physical goods. So I can go to Santos or to Paranaguá or to Argentina and I can buy FOB cargoes. On the contrary, if I'm bearish, I start selling futures, selling options, or I start selling soybean CNF China. And then, okay, once it's time to cover the position, I will buy or sell accordingly. Yeah, that's the logic. So that's what we call the game plan, where we come with an idea, we propose the idea to the managers, risk managers, and then we execute.
Okay. Do you know about FFA a little bit?
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what is the difference with future and FFA?
Well, if you're having beans, a position, a market where you have all the different positions open, you can derive a forward curve. Okay, but I don't think it's the same. I think it's different.
It's different, yeah, but the logic sometimes people can mix it. So that's...
No, what you need to have in order to make the market more attractive to trade is thick forward curves. By thick, I mean curves where you have liquidity all around the curve. Otherwise, sometimes you have forward curves where you have all the liquidity in the nearby, and at the end, the liquidity is almost nil. So if you have a thick forward curve, it's more attractive because you can play the form of the curve. So you can go from carry to inverse, from inverse to carry, and you can trade at around.
Okay, it's quite interesting. Okay. And then you spell taking position. So you have future and you have taking position. What do you mean by taking this?
Well, if you buy futures, you have a long, so you took a position. If you wanted to sell first, you are short, so you have a position. So by having a position, I mean either you are long or short. So you have risk in your hands once you develop a position. So this is why I like to differentiate between traders and merchants. Traders are people who are taking positions, so you are dealing with risk. If you are a merchant, you are buying and selling at the same time, probably back to back, and you also face risk, but you don't face market risk. You are facing operational risk, credit risk, which is a different thing. So for me, you trade when you go to the bet carrying a position in your back.
Okay, quite interesting. And for the freight trading team, what do they take as position? They just...
Well, it depends. They can take a position if they have a view on freight, so they can buy and sell freight, and they develop a position, or they can trade back to back. For example, I need a boat to go from Brazil to China, and I buy from my freight department a boat, and they go to the market and they cover it. So they don't have a position.
Okay, very quite interesting. What kind of big players do we have in the markets?
As the big main names?
Yeah.
Usually people speak in the agriculture industry about the four big names. They're called ABCD. So ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus. In my opinion, you need to add today COFCO, the big Chinese player, because it's very relevant, not only because of the size, but also because of the influence and the information they may have about the moves that China is going to make. And then you have plenty of other smaller players. You have regional players, you have local players. So sometimes people believe that the market is very concentrated, and sometimes people call it oligopoly. And I disagree. I think it's a very competitive market. Actually, there are almost no margins for up to SIF, given the kind of risk you are taking. And yeah, you have players competing all the time to buy from the farmers, to sell to destinations. Yeah, these 4 or 5 guys, they are bigger than others. But for example, I was making an analysis the other day. If you combine the equity of the biggest 8 agriculture players, ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Dreyfus, Cofco, Collam, Wilmer, and Viterra, the 8 together are much smaller than Nestle or Pepsi, for example. Much smaller. So the equity of these 8 big players is around $150 million and $billion, and Pepsi and Nestle are 200 plus.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so it's not the same.
No, it's not the same, but sometimes people see these companies are very big, and I'm not saying they are small, but they are not as big as people think. And they are definitely much smaller than energy companies, much smaller. So if you take, I don't know, Cargill, Bunge, and if you compare that with Shell, with BP, they are much smaller.
Yeah, okay, so it's interesting what you say because, yeah, we always compare them to with traffic or little.
Well, these are traders, so it's different. So Ditol and Trafigura probably they are smaller than BP, okay, but they have probably better returns because they have a much smaller asset base.
Yeah, and then depending the type of volume, the volume we could oil is much bigger.
Sure.
So,
But the big traders are like big wholesale supermarkets. You trade volume for very thin margins. Okay, the niche players are more like boutiques. You trade small volume for very high margins.
Okay, what about the little player, like small player, for example? Do they need to finance the commodity to?
Yeah, most of them, they need money in order to finance the commodity, yeah.
on the deeper then
No, you can basically, you can finance a bit with your equity, but you need also credit lines. So the banks, they play a big role, basically making all the trade possible.
how this was this finance trade, the commodities trading finance?
Which banks?
I mean, which bills, but how the fuel process works, what is the due diligence, or if you are small, what are the chances to get a loan, or if you are big?
Well, the same like if you go to a bank to ask for money, if you are reliable, if you can basically sell a story, if they buy the story, if they trust, if you can put warranties, they may give you money. The bigger you are, the better name, the better the track record, they will give you more money.
Okay, what are the names of the biggest community banks?
Well, Rabobank probably is a big commodity bank, there's a Dutch bank, and there are several French banks as well, some Chinese banks as well. Today you have also some people in the Middle East also starting to lend money to the commodity world.
Okay, it's quite funny because South America, Asia, we produce the commodity. On Europe, we are trading with the commodity.
I think people are here because of a combination of probably 3-4 different things. One is fiscal. Okay. Second, in terms of time zone, you're in the right place because you can deal in your morning with Asia and with the afternoon with America. So that's comfortable. I think also you have access to a very good talent pool. Okay. And I think also there are historical reasons. A lot of these big trading houses came here after the Second World War to rebuild Europe.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's say these locations are challenged as well by Singapore, by Dubai, that they offer other advantages. So yeah, it's not written in stone that this is always the best place.
Okay, okay, quite interesting. Now to ask you more about, so when you started as a commodity trader, can you maybe talk more about your story?
Yeah, I didn't have any idea about commodity trading. Actually, I wanted to be an economics professor. I studied a PhD in NYU, New York University, but I didn't finish. And then I went back to Argentina, and it was time to decide what to do. And my family had silos, country elevators. So my great-grandparents came from Croatia into Argentina. Those days, Croatia didn't exist. It was part of the Austrian-Hungary Empire. So they came late 19th century. And they developed like a chain of country elevators. And because of that, all this business was always very familiar to me. But when I joined, my family was a bit, in the society, they had a small share already. So I didn't find room to work for the family company. So I decided to join basically the other side of the desk. So I started working for an exporter and I joined Cargill. And when I went to an interview with Cargill, I didn't know about commodity trading, really. See, I knew they were buying grain, but I didn't understand what was really trading. So, and because I was an accountant, I could have finished doing taxes or human resources or whatever. And then I started in the commercial part, and then I started discovering about trading, and I became very passionate about it. But I didn't have a plan. You keep in mind that, okay, I'm 60 years old. When I started, we didn't have internet to check about. So when I went to an interview with Cargill, I didn't have any place to check about it. So I remember I asked my father, and my father said, yeah, you should try with them because they are good people. Okay, because he was selling the grain to them and they were paying. So that was the only reference I had. Yeah, they were big and they were good people. And I still believe that they are big and they are very good people.
That's good. Okay. And then, so for you, it was, how did you start having your first deal, or did you have like stressful situations?
Well, I initially was buying grains for our country elevators in our region. So Cargill used to have those days 4 big country elevators in North Buenos Aires, South Santa Fe, and Cordoba. And we were buying beans, wheat, maize, and flour seed for the country elevators. That was my first job. No, the first stressful thing was they sent me one day to make a crop survey. Okay, and I remember I went, and because I was an accountant, I didn't have any clue about how different plants look, and my crop survey was a total disaster. Okay, but no, I don't remember any other. The thing is that it's important that at the very beginning, okay, you're dealing with small things, and you get very nervous about small things. And then, okay, when you put it in perspective and you see the volume, you start trading later on, okay, you laugh a bit about what's at the beginning, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. And then you switched to becoming a professor at university.
Yeah, but I started basically teaching in 2008 while I was still working in Cargill. So here in the University of Geneva, there is a Master of Commodity Trading that was inaugurated in 2008. And I started basically teaching the master since then. So this is the 17th year already I'm teaching there. And I teach agriculture commodities there. And also now there is a diploma and a certificate, and I teach market intelligence in the diploma. Okay, then I teach in Rotterdam as well. I teach in Argentina. Okay, I organize seminars basically, 20 hours, 25 hour seminars.
Okay. What is do you see the potential on what kind of odds, I would say, products do we see on the market right now in the startup industry and the VC, venture capital world?
No, in AgTech is different than that. In AgTech, the idea is more that you are going to help farmers to become more efficient. So it's not only about developing a new product. Maybe you develop a technology to track things or a platform to trade things, but it's not developing a new product. New products, yeah, could be, I don't know, vegetable meat or these kind of things, which so far they were not very successful. But again, it's more about how to gain efficiencies or how to reconcile production with the environment. For example, all the area of biological fertilizer, biological pesticides, and all these kind of things. Yeah, that's more or less what you do in AgTech.
Now, it was the last question. Do you have something to add? It can be an anecdote, it can be tips for young people, it can be anything.
No, I always like to recommend this profession to young people. I think it's very interesting, it's very dynamic, there is no routine. You can combine knowledge from economics, politics, geopolitics, biology, meteorology. It opens the door for traveling, you learn about new cultures, you have colleagues from all around the world, you hear different languages, so it's very enriching. And I'm always surprised when I speak. I have kids of around 25 to 30 years old. And when I speak with their friends, usually they have no idea about commodity trading. So they finish the uni and they want to become consultants. They want to work for big banks, investment banking, or some of the big names in technology. But commodities are never in the list. So when you start describing about our profession, I think some of them may get engaged and they like to do it. And this is why I like to share my experience at the university and with people, because I find this profession really fascinating. I would do it again. I wouldn't change anything about it. And I still have very good memories, a lot of passion. And I think it helps also to keep your brain super active because, again, days are always different. and it's good for people to learn more about it.
Well said. Thank you for this podcast for the invitation. Thank you. It was a pleasure. I wish you, of course, all the best.
Okay.